What is FAIR? FAIR is it's a new announcement scooped by the repository. I had a chance to get a tiny appetizer of FAIR. Not the best appetizer either. It was like a cold mozzarella stick serving where you only got 4 and you were like, how much did I pay for this? When Kareem took the stage once again with the repository at PressConf earlier this year. And he was trying to explain what FAIR was up to. But, it was a little early on, so he was probably just trying to build some buzz. Let me just read the press release that hit my inbox this morning. I don't often publish press releases, and I still am not going to after today. But I'll read the opening salvo from this press release from the Linux Foundation. So today, the Linux Foundation launched the FAIR Package Manager project, a federated and independent repository of trusted plugins and themes for end users, web hosts, commercial plugins, and tool developers in the WordPress ecosystem. The FAIR Package Manager project stabilizes the entire WordPress ecosystem. It eliminates the reliance on any single source of core update, plugins, themes, and more, unites a fragmented ecosystem by bringing together plugins from any source and builds security into the supply chain. It provides governance in the open source content management ecosystem, especially as corporate interests threaten to encroach on open source freedoms. This was announced at an event called Alt-Control.org, which just so happens to run right before WordCamp Europe. As of this recording, this was Friday, and Matt Mullenweg will be or should be taking the stage tomorrow, as of this recording, to do his typical keynote at WordCamp events. So obviously not interesting timing. It was the timing that they wanted, right, to announce this specifically. So this is where we're at. We have this new initiative called FAIR. It's under the Linux Foundation. Just few things I just want to get out of the way as I go about this. I've never been approached by anyone part of the FAIR group or membership, council, whatever it is. No one's asked me to review anything or, I certainly don't have any other insights. And I'm much more of a power user. I feel like I generally represent agency owners, freelancers, again, power users of WordPress. I am not somebody that is writing lines of code, committing lines of code. I look at the stuff that is impacting WordPress, or I see what WordPress is doing, and I try to disseminate this down for the WordPress professional, like I just said. Freelancer, power user, agency owner. How will this impact my day-to-day of survival in WordPress, in like building sites for people? How do I use these plugins? I'm a huge advocate of open source. I love it. I love the idea of it. And I love open source WordPress, of course. So this is the lens I look through. And throughout this episode, I really just have more questions than I have like concrete answers or beliefs. I don't know which way to go with that. So the Linux Foundation, I have questions there. I mean, it makes sense that FAIR is going under the Linux Foundation umbrella. They have 900 open source projects. Again, they've been doing this for decades. They kind of understand what it's like to usher in open source projects, and they have that infrastructure or plumbing or guidance, assuming they do, that will help throughout this project. It is being overseen by a 3-person technical steering committee comprised of longtime contributors Carrie Dills, Mika Epstein, and Ryan McHugh. That's a snippet from the repository's post. I'll link that up in the show notes. And the effort's being coordinated by Yoast and crowd favorite CEO Kareem Maruki. So I guess the first question is, why the Linux Foundation, aside from my assumption of, well, it makes sense. They need the backing. They need potentially the financial backing to organize stuff at a higher level. I'll also link up the live stream of the Alt-Control.org event, and you can get some of those answers by listening to that episode or that live stream. But the one thing that I'm sort of concerned over, like the thing that makes my right eyebrow go up when I read just the title that was published on the Linux Foundation, is Linux Foundation announces the FAIR Package Manager project for open source content management system stability. So while it's opening up with WordPress today, FAIR Package Manager project for open source content management system stability does not say WordPress. They're starting with WordPress? Question mark? But I'm curious if this evolves into something greater, and WordPress just happens to be the great, first step. Here's a quote from the Linux Foundation blog post. Quote, "The Fair Package Manager project paves the way for stability and growth of open source content management, giving contributors and businesses additional options governed by a neutral community," said Jim Zemlin, executive director of the Linux Foundation. "We look forward to growth in community and contributions this important project attracts." So no mention of WordPress there. Of course, the rest of the article is talking about how they're working with WordPress, at least at the start, right? So there's that. This is not a fork of WordPress. I think they're making that clear. This is a way to build the back end of distribution. And let me just break that down for you. So I've been a long time Linux user, although I say long time, I haven't used it in about 15 years, or I haven't installed it myself in about, that's not fair, because I was playing around with a Raspberry Pi and I installed some stuff a couple of years ago. So, but many, many years ago as a system admin. And when you installed Linux, it was installing it not just from one server, it was installing it from a collection of servers, and some packages on some servers, the same package on hundreds of servers, right? It's this layer of distribution, and it's going to help from that single point of failure, which is WordPress.org. Now, we're looking at it from the single point of failure being Mullenweg, and of course the recent actions, and it does make sense, right? This makes sense from a package management perspective. Like, why wouldn't we want to do this? The challenge is getting people to adopt it, right? So I didn't hear any or read any mention of any web hosts. I've said this on other podcast episodes. Like, the biggest moat that WordPress has is distribution, which far too many people don't talk about when they talk about alternatives to WordPress core, WordPress plugin management, forking WordPress. Like, it is on so many web hosts, and so many web hosts promote it because it is a free resource to them, quite literally, to gain a paid customer. It's naturally getting distributed at an insane rate. It's also why, to be fair, Mullenweg wants web hosts that benefit so greatly monetarily from WordPress to give back. So I see both sides of it. Makes sense to me. So by installing this plugin, at least, as of this recording, which is literally the day that they announced it, you're not going to see anything really different. It's going to do an API replacement. As it stands, it replaces communication with WordPress.org APIs, such as update checks and event feeds, using local in favor of using local or fair governed alternatives. Decentralized package management. So Fair introduces a new package distribution model for themes and plugins. It supports opt-in packages that use the Fair protocol and enables hosts to configure their own mirrors for plugins and themes data using the AspirePress for their own domains, or using AspirePress for their own domains. While stable plugins currently use mirrors from WordPress.org, future versions will fully support Fair native packages. So, kind of confusing if you're not living and breathing this stuff on a day-to-day basis, but it does make sense. Like, yes, I want decentralized package management. I want to know that if something happens to WordPress.org throughout a lawsuit or decision being made, that the plugins that I've installed on client sites or my own sites are still healthy and updating. Makes total sense. Will this evolve? Will this Fair package management system under the Linux Foundation umbrella evolve into something else where eventually we're not just talking about WordPress anymore, we're talking about all these other CMSs? Again, fine, but you know how that goes, right? A bill gets introduced to Congress, goes up and down the aisles, and before you know it, the name has changed and a gazillion other things have been added in. This is just human nature. So will we see this kind of thing happen with the Fair package management system? I think it's a fair question. I'm gonna play on that pun for a while. So what's going to happen in the future? Who knows? I also listened to an interview with Kareem and Yoast on a podcast called Kraut.press, or Kraut Press, where they talked about this. Yoast had a passing statement where he said it is a replacement for the ecosystem.
So that's what Fair is. It's a replacement for the .org ecosystem. A federated replacement?
Which I don't know what that means. I would unpack this broader vision for a replacement for the ecosystem. And when I hear that, I just have to be honest, like, where's the commercial level levied somewhere? Like, where are we levying the commercial side of things in this space? Because that will be the next big domino to fall in the adoption and perception of FAIR. One of the things that many people have always said, myself included, to Matt Mullenweg, is why not make WordPress.org an official marketplace where you can buy stuff? Now, I think now that we've had this lawsuit, it's all been uncovered and we kind of know a little bit more about WordPress.org and the plumbing behind that. We know why, like, that's not happening over there, but they are seemingly making it happen on WordPress.com. Like, WordPress.com already has and had paid plugins through WordPress.com. And maybe now they'll push it even further because of everything that has happened, and sort of like this, I don't want to say fragmentation, but it's fragmented in the sense of, well, the bigger issue with FAIR Package Manager is, if this doesn't get adopted, like, it must get adopted. That same level of distribution that WordPress thrives and survives on, FAIR needs to do that too. Otherwise, you're just installing FAIR one website at a time. You need many hosts to really make a dent in the overall footprint of WordPress being installed. You need agency owners. It's going to be the same challenge. The same challenge that I've always had, or the same criticism I've always had with Mullenweg and WordPress, WordPress.com, Automatic, is people need to work together. And that's like the big flag that everyone's flying. We need to work together on this. Like, if this is good, yes, no, thumbs up. This is good for everybody. Yeah, I think so. Now we all have to work together to, like, make this happen. And that'll be the sticking point. It'll be the sticking point where the same criticisms can happen towards FAIR that have happened towards Matt, WordPress, and Automatic. And, I'm really curious if everyone is ready for that, right? When Yoast says this is a replacement for the ecosystem, I mean, knowing Yoast, like, he's probably thinking, okay, how can we, like, monetarily survive? And also thinking, like, how can we help other commercial plugin developers survive as well? There's going to be something there. What is that something? I don't know. How does that work across web hosts, agencies, enterprise, where Kareem spends most of his time? What's their vision for that? And along those same lines of transparency, I think we're going to start to see that across the board. Say Reed from WPCC received back in January over $500,000 from GoDaddy and other contributors. I contributed a few years ago on behalf of the WP Minute. Actually not quite sure, like, where that has landed. I know there was some kind of fork. I've asked questions, but I don't really fully understand what happened with the WPCC and some of those funds over there. They split the nonprofit or something. It's neither here nor there, but the point is I think, it's been a half a year, roughly, almost a half year, of the WPCC and the $500,000 plus from GoDaddy. Courtney Robertson from GoDaddy asked Say Reed about sponsoring contributors, and I'm curious, how will FAIR fare with contributions, with people supporting others to help the development of that? Will we see funds from WPCC go to support development of this initiative? I don't want to say the dust has settled, but as the dust is settling, maybe, on the Automatic and WP Engine stuff, anyone who's truly working on an initiative to do something else for WordPress, like FAIR, like WPCC, must be open to the same criticisms that we've given Mullenweg and Automatic and WordPress Foundation for many years, because we want to see things happen. We hear that something's happening, and then nothing happens. This is something that has plagued WordPress forever. both in code, features, and the community and community-driven projects. Like, what is happening, right? We want to support this thing. We want to support this person. Person gets money. Project gets attention. Media outlets cover it, and nothing happens. And I'm not saying that falls squarely on the person who started it. It's just, it's tough. It is tough. Open source is so much about human involvement. So, questions is really, where it's at. And what's the promise behind this? The way that I'm seeing it is the use of FAIR, the fair use of FAIR, is going to help that technical level of distribution. But does that turn into something else? And how does this ultimately impact the agencies? The people who are, what I will say, call them cheerleaders, call them people working in the trenches to get WordPress out there, not only for their client, but for their own livelihood of their own agency. How is this going to help somebody? Okay, we have the insurance policy of WordPress.org, but what else? Is that it? I'm kind of fine with that. But the gut tells me that it's going to try to evolve into something else. It'll take time, but it'll try to evolve into something else. Because I think what we're going to see is larger interested parties want to know, like, what's in it for them. Once again, human nature. And I think one of the biggest issues, too, is like in order to get to that next step, as I said, distribution, understanding, more human interaction. This also came up in the live stream. How do you market this thing? How does it make sense other than that insurance policy? You'll get the stakeholders at Webhost to do it, to install it. Will you get them to install it by default? Don't know. Will it be installed as an optional thing? Don't know. But in order to package it and present it to the average person, and by the average person, I mean like the average agency owner who's making a dozen to 100 websites for people a year, if that's still a thing, to install and use this stuff too. So there's a marketing, a branding, more marketing, like marketing and messaging. What does this really mean for us power users and agency owners? Why should we use this? I've talked about this before, and this is a touchy subject. And this is something that we see more and more in the space. Well, this is something, what I'm about to say is something that we see more and more in real life. But it's like you're either on one side or the other. And you can't be in the middle with anything. Politics, the food you like, the car you drive, the CMS platform you use. And now it'll be the distribution server of choice. And I will tell you, this rollout is definitely a coordinated rollout. Obviously, nothing against it, but it's definitely a coordinated rollout. And it does really kind of feel like, for people that want this to be adopted and expanded upon, it still feels like a club. And by the way, getting into WordPress feels like a club as well. Oh, and by the way, as somebody who has published content for 15 plus years in the WordPress space, it still feels like a club. Like when I talk, or when anyone that I feel like I might represent talks, if you're not talking pure open source, if you're not talking pure developer speak, if you're not talking purely about automatic or against automatic, then you're just not listened to. Or if you don't go to every single WordCamp and go to every single contributor day, your voice is sort of muffled out. And this is something that I pay close attention to.
We got a bit of response from the ecosystem already. People reaching out like, hey, we're also worried. We have our thoughts. Then there was a post on WordPress.org about us doing a fork, which we weren't doing. And then we got a lot more reach out from people around the ecosystem.
At the time, before, we were speaking about the need for federation and the need for the idea around how do we create an ecosystem that everybody can work with. And as he said, when we first posted, we thought we were relatively alone, but then these other groups all started quietly reaching out. So there was only a few right up until Matt posted the JK Press post. That sort of pushed it over the edge, and the outreach became immense.
Hopefully, we want to work with everybody truly doesn't mean we only want to work with people who are against Matt and Automatic. Because here's the final thing, and this is what I'm going to close with. And I did hear Yoast say this. Luckily, kind of saved it as I was listening to this, because I wasn't screaming at the rooftops. This is really not impacting my life on a Friday night to that degree. But what I'm not hearing is how this innovates WordPress. Now, he did use that keyword as his closing statement in the live stream. He calls it innovation. Okay, yes, it's innovative to have a distribution, a federated distribution for WordPress. Okay. It's innovative in the sense we've never had it before. But how does that go further? How does that go a step further? Because I don't see this actually making WordPress better as a piece of software. I don't see it making WordPress more attractive for the end user. And by the way, WordPress attractiveness has never been in the crosshairs more than it is today, with all of the competition of commercial and closed source CMSs that you can just go buy and spin up, Webflow, Wix, etc. And now with AI, I'm wondering, will the future developers even want to use WordPress to build things with? Is the essence of open source just getting eroded through AI, or will we see a whole other layer of open source? But that's the big thing for me, is WordPress already has a marketing issue and a packaging issue and a branding issue, and what can it do? And everyone's so down on it. And wow, look at this shiny thing called AI over here. I want to support things that encourages WordPress to thrive and to be used as the tool that it's intended to be, ? Or just how you want to use it. Like pulling WordPress off the shelf to use in a project should be exciting. It should be easy. It should feel like you made the right choice to start a website, a blog, community site, the framework for an app, a visual database layer for data that you're piping in through the REST API with all these other AI tools you're helping build alongside of it. Like, you should feel good you pick WordPress. And now what we have is people just scratching their head going, do I use this? Is this for me? What is now? We're all fighting with each other. We're fighting with web hosts. Like, what's happening? You know what? I'm just going to go over here and use this other thing. So really, at the end of all of this presentation about FAIR, I guess the most important thing that I really see eye to eye with is innovation. And how do we continue to make WordPress the innovative solution in the open source ecosystem for the future developers and for the end users who want to use a turnkey solution?